with C19 and everything that's happening in the market, we've seen a number of our customers that are going through the transition where their plants were somewhat in an idle mode, and now they're going to be turning things back on. And so this is all about, what do you do? How do you start it up? How do you do it safely? There's just a ton of information that we're going to be presenting today, and I think you guys are going to collectively enjoy this. So here we begin. Next slide. So I'm going to start off with just a couple of slides in terms of who FZ is, and then we're going to transition from, we're going to go through a safety moment. We're then going to transition into the subject matter experts, etc. So FZ, real quickly, we're celebrating our 40th year. We're a turnkey electrical and industrial technology services company. We're headquartered in Grand Rapids, but we serve, clients nationwide. We've got offices in Nashville. We've got also offices in Charleston, Traverse City. So very strong presence, 500 plus people that make up our company. And what's awesome is our culture really is about people, safety, and values really intertwined. And that really is what customers love about us, is the way we work with them, the way we add value, the way we deliver electrical projects and the services that we provide. So exciting stuff. So what does FZ do? We provide, on the left-hand side there, industrial automation, controls, PLCs. We do robotic work. We're heavy into industrial networking and security, both on the logical and the physical layers. We have a number of IoT and digital solutions. We do panel build, virtual design and construction. We've got a complete prefab group. Again, electrical services, technology infrastructure, including, again, data cabling. We'll do fiber. And then we actually get into systems installation, including audio-visual type systems, as well as BMS systems for the facilities for the companies that we work with. Our customers. So at the end of the day, this webinar is about adding value to you and taking our wisdom and knowledge and our skill sets, and we're trying to bring this educational webinar to you, our customers. So we've got a great diverse set of customers across a number of different industries. And in this time that we're all under, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for being great customers. We absolutely love working with you, and we want to continue that as we go forward. From a safety tip perspective, what I wanted to do was just talk about a couple things, especially as we think about C19. So safety, as I mentioned, is a big part of our culture at FZ. And so we have a safety system that we practice, and any of our teams, if anybody has dealt with FZ, knows that safety is like is a huge part of all of our lives, and we want our people, our employees, the customers we work with to have a very safe environment. So in that spirit, from an EHS perspective, with COVID, let's take a moment and just think about staying healthy, right? So again, as we navigate through everything that's going forward, wash your hands, right? Spend 20 minutes. A good tip that we're working with our team on is, to really get through it, sing the alphabet, right? And if you cannot wash your hands with soap and water, make sure you got a sanitizer that, from a CDC perspective, is 60% alcohol. And then the tough thing that we all have to transition through is, don't touch your face, eyes, nose, mouth. So, just a gentle reminder for us all in terms of safety and COVID-19. So transitioning into why we're here, our objectives from a learning perspective today is we're going to cover, how to safely return to work and what are some of the best practices that we're seeing from a national perspective. And so we want to share some of those best practices. And then there's also, besides the people side of it and the processes, there's also, what do you need to do in terms of all the electrical functions that need to be started back up in your operations? First of all, what are they? What are the major areas? How do you prepare for that stuff? And then there's also an element that we're going to touch on, which is recovery procedures. And then for those of you who have signed up for this, we're going to share our checklist that our folks use in the field that we use at customer sites. So there's going to be a follow-up email that we'll do either tomorrow or early next week that will get out to all the customers who are attending. And again, I'm going to encourage all of you as we move forward, if you could write down some of your questions and or bring them up to us in the chat function, or as some of you are already done, send us an email with some of that questions that you may have. So with that, I'm going to introduce our subject matter experts. And it's great that we've got a really diverse group of folks that are here. So at the top, we've got Jim, who is a veteran with 25 years plus experience in industrial automation and controls. Jim not only has been around the block, he's seen, experienced, and lived a lot of things in and around the plant floor. So Jim, thanks again for being here. Ken is here, Roland Hagen, who's at FZ, is our technical training manager. He's a master electrician licensed in the state of Michigan. He oversees our apprentice program, tons of great experience. So Ken has been there, he's rolled up his sleeves, he's gotten dirty in the plants. And so he's going to give us some of his wisdom that he's accumulated. And then I'm really pleased that Kelly was able to join us, Kelly Hogan from Sandalwood, which is a partner of FZ's. And Sandalwood is a company that does engineering and ergonomics. And we're partnering with Sandalwood because they have some really great services that we don't provide. And we thought it'd be great for us to have Kelly here. But she has a master's degree in kinesiology along with biometrics from the university up in Canada there, Waterloo. Great experience, 20 years plus, certificate in occupational health and safety from Ryerson. So it's great to have Kelly on with us as well. And Kelly's actually going to be starting the webinar, just giving us an overview of what is happening from how do you bring your people back to work and what are the challenges and what are the procedures and the planning activities that you should do. And then once Kelly is through, we're going to turn it over to Jim and Ken, and they're going to tag team around starting up more of your plant side equipment and how to do that. So with that, Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thanks again for being here. Excited to hear your presentation.
Great. Thanks, Steve, and good morning, everybody. I'm glad to have this opportunity to share all of this information with you. There is a lot of information out there right now on the safety side of return to operations, and my hope is to give you an overview of things that you will need to consider when ramping up your operations. I want to start off by letting everyone know that there's no one approach to fit all workplaces, that these are recommendations based on best practices that we're seeing, and each workplace is unique. There may be circumstances unique to your location, and there may be some cases in which these recommendations may need to be adapted to address your facility's specific requirements. Additionally, all facilities must comply with the applicable laws, meaning that if there's a conflict between the recommendations we're showing here today and the applicable laws, the facility must follow the applicable law. I realize that some workplaces may have already started up, so at this point, I'm hoping that these might be some tips you can add to your plan that you already have in place. Right. So let's start by reviewing what you need to have in place to ensure a safe return to operations and mitigation of risks. What you need to do first is establish a designated team to support these activities. So who should be on this team? Representatives from HR, facilities, safety, operations, and also it'd be really great to have some employee reps to give you some feedback. And why do you need a team? This is a new territory for most people, and the information and guidance is changing rapidly. Having a designated team will ensure that you have the most up-to-date information, that you're making a risk-based approach, and your local, your state public health, OSHA and MIOSHA are also going to be providing you guidance. It is your responsibility as an employer to understand what those risks are, what the guidance is, and to make the appropriate decisions for your workplace. The size of your workplace will determine the size of your task force to address the risks. I want to mention that OSHA provides definitions of risk exposure levels, And so you really should check out what those exposure levels are. You may fall into a low risk category, and that will make things much easier for you. These are used to guide you and your task force in the development of your infectious disease preparedness and response plan. As you develop the plan, it's important as well to ensure that you are open to changes and that you can be as fluid with the information and recommendations are changing rapidly. The advantage of having a team in place is that the team can be dedicated to staying up to date and then can help pivot you whenever the recommendations change and you need to put new things in place. Lastly, this team can ensure that the required information is provided to all employees, that questions are answered, and there's a point of contact. Employees may be nervous coming back to work right now. You may have special circumstances that need to be addressed, and having a team to work in this space and dedicated in this space will build trust with your employees and lead to a smoother return to operations. Next slide, please. Once you have your team in place, you can start to apply this 5-step approach. And this approach is an approach recommended by the International SOS, and links will be provided at the end of the session in an email. As you can see, there's many subtasks to the main task in this approach. For the purpose of this presentation, we're going to stick to the main tasks, but I encourage you to look at the link at the end of the session. Next slide, please. So our first step in the approach is risk assessment. As previously mentioned, you need a plan specific to your site, and in order to do so, you need to start with a risk assessment. Your return to operations plan is specific to your location, and as a result, requires you to assess what those risks are that are present. For example, some of the things you can ask yourself is, are you required to work with the public? Do you work in healthcare or with healthcare? Can you social distance and the regular course of your work? Maybe you only need minimal changes as you return to your operations. In addition, you will need to review the trending of cases in your local area, as this may be guiding on additional recommendations that you need to take because of where you are located. All this information will help determine what's needed to protect the workers. The higher the level of risk, the more mitigation and the more controls that will be needed. Next slide, please. So workplace zoning is the next consideration. Some of the things that you need to consider are, can you open certain areas before others? Can you open a phased approach based on the risks that are present? Is the building ready for opening? Do you have space guidelines in place? Meaning, do you have protocols for what to do in washrooms, in lunchrooms, for visitors, and in public areas? The mitigations or controls for each workplace may vary, and this may also have a direct result on the costs associated with putting those mitigation controls in place. Next slide, please. Social distancing or physical distancing, we're hearing a lot about this, and you need to consider what do you have in place to address the social and physical distancing. Does your work already allow for you to keep 6 feet away from each other? Then maybe that's a minimal change that you need to make. If not, can you implement the wearing of masks or other personal protective equipment? Some workplaces are requiring the use of masks anyways, regardless of where you're located, what your workplace zone is, because of those incidental locations such as hallways and washrooms. If your tasks require you to be within 6 feet, you might need to do some additional PPE, such as face shields or safety glasses with side shields. Barriers, such as plexiglass dividers and process changes, may also need to be considered. At this point, you should be noting how site-specific these recommendations are. And again, realizing that you need to have your own policy and you can't just adopt something that's general and you can find on the internet. Next slide, please. So now that you have zoned your workplace, you may need to start looking at how your employees are going to enter your site. Point of entry screening and program management is going to be needed. Do you have the need and the ability to implement these? Here again, you're going to need to look at your local regulations, your state as well as your local ones, as they will guide you on this. Some examples of point of entry screening are daily wellness checks, questionnaires for all staff, temperature checks, daily cleaning of workstations, and then policies specifically for contractors, shipping and receiving, and for deliveries. If you decide to implement temperature checks or thermal imaging, be prepared to explain what you are achieving as a result of doing those checks. How will you complete those safely, both for the employees that are doing the checks and those that are receiving the checks? Think about who will screen your screener. Next slide, please. And the last step of the approach is communication. It is so extremely important to provide information to your customers, employees, and contractors to allow them to ask questions. This communication should cover the COVID-19 protocols you've put in place, all of your procedures, any training requirements, general health promotion, your return to operations plan, and simply providing a forum for employees, contractors, and customers to address their questions. Next slide, please. So those are the 5 steps for the approach to get yourself going and back up to return to operations. But I'd like to talk specifically right now about how to prepare your facility. As you return to operations, and keep in mind a phased entry, you should continue to determine the essential functions of your on-site support. Those that can support remotely should continue to do so. This allows you to make changes gradually and respond to ongoing recommendations from your local and/or CDC. This will also keep your costs down by allowing you to put this phased approach in place. Administration and engineering controls are both needed to be considered when you implement your social and physical distancing. Examples of control that should be included: physical barriers, spacing of workstations in the office, reducing seating in break areas, eliminating the cafeteria use, and eliminating meeting room use, having designated areas to enter and exit the building, and increased air ventilation and adding fresh airflow. Again, these will be based on what your risk assessment indicates. You should note, if you implement PPE requirements on your site, you will need to train your workers on the use of it, the disposal, and how you will be providing it to them. Do you have inventories of PPE and the cleaning supplies needed to support your plan? You will need to secure these prior to your return to operations. Do you have a plan to increase cleaning and disinfecting routines on your site? What is your specific cleaning procedures if someone is diagnosed with COVID-19? Have you considered how you will handle visitors? Will they follow a similar questionnaire? Will they be required to wear PPE? How will you be notifying them of your acceptable types of PPE that you're accepting? And who is responsible for providing it? You want to plan ahead and your contractors' work by preparing them ahead of time. Thermal imaging is a good no-touch way to gather temperature data. You will need to have a protocol if you're going to implement this, and you need to know what to do when employees, contractors, or customers exhibit high temperatures. Retest options and physical separation areas are going to be needed here. Next slide, please. Once you have your team, plan, and procedures in place, you will need to educate and communicate with your employees. When employees return to the workplace, there should be no surprises. They should know exactly what they are required to do or what is in place. Communication before arrival is important, and this goes for your customers, contractors, and suppliers as well. Communication topics should focus on reducing the transmission of disease when they return to work. Some of the topics should include healthy hygiene practices, which we reviewed at the beginning of this session ourselves, location of hand sanitizing stations, cleaning protocols, disposals for disinfectant wipes. Keeping open all your trash cans will reduce touch surfaces. Having communication posters and reminders up will be helpful. Remember to discuss reductions in in-person meetings. Even if you're in the same building, you may still want to do things virtually. What training is available and what are the screening protocols? Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, actually I'm not done yet. Can you go back one slide? Thanks. You should also be investigating your flexible protocols for sick leave. You don't want your employees to be coming in and being sick. If they have symptoms, you need them to stay home to protect your workforce, and they need to feel supported when they're doing so. You should also be prepared to tell employees when they can return to work after they've been sick. The CDC will provide guidelines on that for your reference, and those are changing, so you need your team to keep up to date. You should openly encourage employees to share their concerns about the workplace as well, so that you can address any risks or exposures that you haven't thought of. Finally, you should investigate cross-training teams and preparing for absenteeism to maintain business continuity during periods of high absenteeism due to this illness. Next. So some things that we're continuing to work on and discuss on our side, and we really want you to consider as you end up back at work and as your work continues, is that from an injury prevention perspective, you need to consider that your workers may be deconditioned to work. They may have been off, inactive, and during that time, not doing any sort of physical activity. So coming back and returning them to full physical duties may put them at risk for an injury. So work conditioning programs, gradual increases in duties, and other recommendations may be beneficial. And also, don't forget that all of your regular safety requirements still need to be applied and followed. So this does not take priority over anything else that you need to have in place. You also need to consider how you will accommodate your high-risk populations. For example, those that are at high risk for contracting the disease, or those that cannot wear the recommended PPE. Are you able to provide a special work environment if needed? Can you provide someone an enclosed office as opposed to an open office? Or can you delay their return to work to the office a little bit longer? It'd be really beneficial to contact a medical physician to help you guide this on your best practices for your site. What will you do if, and many are saying it's not if, but it's when, someone at your site is diagnosed with COVID-19? Do you have procedures in place for cleaning, contact tracing, notifications to employees and contractors, support for those that are ill, return to work medical criteria, and any plans to address your unusual absenteeism? If you have protocols, and this is a really important thing to note, if you have suitable protocols in place to address the cleaning and your social distancing, then you should not have to shut down operations if you have a diagnosis. But you need to have that documented, and it needs to be practiced well. And don't forget all the other policies that could be affected by having these procedures in place, like recruitment. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so this is the end of my talking. Here's a list of the references I used to put this all together, and we'll be providing links in the documents at the end in an email follow-up. I just want to note as well that Sandalwood will be offering a more in-depth webinar on this topic, where we'll be reviewing a detailed risk assessment checklist, the implementation of the engineering administration controls, procedures for follow-up and contact tracing, and take you through some case studies. So if you do have questions though, we are able to support you on this, and you can contact me at khogan@sandalwood.com. So thank you and I appreciate your time on this topic. And I will now pass it over to Jim and Ken from FC.
Thank you, Kelly. That's a lot of great information. Now we're going to talk a little bit about starting up the plant floor. We do acknowledge that a lot of companies never shut down, as they are critical and essential, which we certainly appreciate, and some have already powered up. Those that haven't, these are some recommendations and suggestions that we see from our experience and expertise in this field. If you need support, FC can certainly help. If you have the expertise in your organization, we hope this can serve as a good reminder. So we've broken our thought process down into 5 steps as well, as it relates to facilities, maintenance, and engineering. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ken.
Yeah, so the first thing, kind of speaking on the facilities aspect, the preparation side, just making sure that, as always, we got to make sure we have the correct PPE, the correct safety equipment. So whether this is for the manufacturing or the regular day-to-day operations, or some of those things that Kelly talked about, additional PPE for COVID-19, just making sure you have that on hand. Another thing, preparation, just make sure all of our lockout tagout locations are identified. Again, just speaking in the sense of preventing downtime. When there is downtime, how do we recover quickly? Just incredible help for our maintenance staff, facility staff. If we have those lockout, tagout locations identified, just makes it that much faster to bring things back online. Another preparation would just be maybe like a tool crib or a parts crib, just making sure we have a good stock of those common electrical parts, power supplies, terminal blocks, some of those high frequency used things that need replacement, just making sure you have a well-stocked crib.
Yeah, and with that, you also want to verify you have current prints, drawings, and I/O schedule. You want to make sure that you have the latest version of the machine and control panel prints, any drawings associated with the particular line or machine you'll be working with. Best if electronic, but if those aren't available, hopefully you can find a hard copy. You want to verify you have the current files, whether it be your PLC, your variable frequency drive, HMI, SCADA, motion and vision inspection, and robotics, making sure you have the latest version of the programs for that equipment, along with making sure you have the latest version of the programming software, or at minimum the latest version needed to run those updated programs, as well as any hardware, download cables to load the programs and connect. Next slide, please.
So when it comes to that first visual safety inspection, when you're bringing things back online in that startup process, from a facilities standpoint, real easy just to do a walk through your building and your one line diagram, everything from, the main coming in. You want to make sure that all of your panel legends are updated, any changes, making sure that those are documented. Document disconnect locations. Again, this kind of pertains to that lockout tagout procedure. Where do I go to keep myself safe? Can eliminate a lot of time as a maintenance personnel to in that direction and not figuring it out. So again, just continuing the visual safety inspection more on a maintenance machine level. Just that visual inspection of airlines, hoses, hydraulic systems, looking for any wear items that might be getting worn out, things like that to prevent downtime. The inspection for loose or frayed wiring. So, things inside the control panel. The next checkpoint there, verifying plug-in connectors are tight and secure. Pertains to all electrical connections. So, copper is a very malleable metal. Things like, the thermal side of copper heating up, cooling down can create loose connections, just verifying all those. And then the last thing is really just kind of go around our machines, go around all of our moving parts, making sure that safety guards are installed, whether it's a maintenance or inspection was done, maybe some guards have to be removed, just making sure all those are back intact and safely guarding our people from any hazards.
And visual inspection of equipment and devices, controls equipment and devices. Your HMI and your PLC, checking for visible damage to the screen, any loose or disconnected cables, as Ken mentioned. Sensors and light curtains, same thing, looking for loose connections, any alignment issues, physical damage, and then e-stops. There aren't any engaged, making sure there aren't any engaged that could have you searching for why your machine won't power up. In terms of robotics and end-of-arm tooling, etc., making sure it's mounted securely, checking for loose bolts, damage to the end-of-arm tooling, and any power and cable connection issues that could be there. Next slide.
All right, so when it comes down to a component test, so we've energized the machine, we've already performed our visual safety inspection, so we're going to energize and we're just going to go through a very thorough checklist to bring things online. So whether this is the facilities, the one-line diagram, our main feeder panels down to our plant level, we want to take some voltage readings, right? We want to, kind of document those. We can use those to cross-compare in years following. That'll help us, be a leading indicator for our transformers, things like that. We want to record any calibrations where those things are applicable, making sure if they are a device or a component that has a calibration, when are the requirements? When does it need to be tested and recalibrated? Testing all of our alarm systems. So, horns, sirens, indicators, stack lights, things like that. The last thing we want is a long conveyor system where we've got personnel not knowing when a machine is going to start up. So just testing all those safety components as well.
And verifying HMI operation, making sure that it has the correct time and date where applicable, the screen's functioning properly, displaying properly. Verification of the PLC operation, making sure there aren't any faults or run status or any battery status issues. I/O schedule and verification in terms of inputs, so your sensors, switches, push buttons, make sure they're recognized and operating properly, as well as any cylinders, motors, etc. Additional automation equipment you may have on your machinery and equipment that you'd like or want to verify operation. Robot function, checking for status lights in the home position where applicable, has proper movement, similar with the servo motors, drives, light curtains, safety scanners, make sure they're aligned again and working properly. Vision inspection systems, you want to make sure that you're checking those as well, and then UPS systems that you may have, making sure batteries are functioning properly. Next slide, please.
All right, so after that component test is done, thorough inspection of looking at all things, we're going to start up that actual commissioning process, running cycles, things like that. So with switchgear on the facility side, we really need to take bringing things back online as your whole building system in a very strategic approach. Shutting downstream loads off first before we engage that main, just saving on wear and tear, both on a safety and just from that hardware, aspect, just saving, saving the wear and tear on that equipment. Powering up hydraulics, pneumatics, sometimes is a part of facilities or machine specific, but are those pressures within range? Whether it's, critical for pressures for cylinders to extend or retract, just, again, just kind of diagnosing those. Jim, I think you got the next one.
Review any diagnostic history, including events and alarms, connecting with your equipment and navigating to those screens to view those diagnostic history, events, and alarms. Cycle the equipment. Run a dry cycle on machines where possible to make sure everything is functioning mechanically. Verifying run times, that they are achieving what you're anticipating they're supposed to be. And verifying that there are parts and material to run production. And then lastly, verifying network connectivity and connection to the OT or IT network is working properly, and assessing and or recording any data, accessing and recording any data required and needed. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so our fifth step, after we've completed the first 4 steps, and confirmed startup, it's commissioned, things are running good. We kind of labeled this one sustainable operations, right? What have we learned, and what can we take moving forward to improve the process? So things like regularly scheduled infrared scans and oil samples. So this is a really good leading indicator as far as monitoring our major power systems in a manufacturing or a building facility, so that we can foresee before anything tragic happens. We can plan a shutdown, plan preventative maintenance on those major systems. Arc flash studies. We should be having arc flash studies done on a regular basis, 1 to 3 years. Anytime we have an addition on your building or extra equipment on your plant floor, really need to make an adjustment to your one-line diagram. Parts inventory, is that up to date? We spoke about this. Just as time goes on and maintenance is done on machines, there could be parts supplemented for others. Just is your inventory up to date? What you're actually going to find on your plant floor, and then from some of these things, developing preventative maintenance checklist and a schedule. Having gone through tightening those terminals, it's all about preventing that downtime.
Data collection and predictive maintenance. So really expanding on the preventive maintenance and the technology to consider moving forward is the ability to do predictive maintenance on your equipment, and the data collection and analytics needed to do this very well. And with that, the dashboard tools, line displays, et cetera, to give your operators and decision makers the information and key metrics needed to make critical actions and decisions. The OT network reliability and health monitoring. Certainly a critical element for any data collection and digital solution is having a reliable, robust OT network that is secure and can grow and expand with you in your digital transformation journey of introducing newer, faster, and consistently changing digital technology to solve problems. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Steve.
Hey guys, thanks for that. So Kelly, Jim, and Ken, just really awesome information. I mean, you think about, just all the things that go into starting this back up and getting, employees back to work. It's a daunting task. There's no doubt about it. So I think at this point, what we're going to do is let's do a little bit of, let's go into this and let's open this up and see what kind of questions, if any, we're getting from panelists or the people out there. So we'll give it a minute and just kind of check and see what we have coming in. I know we got a couple emails that popped through, so we'll definitely go through that. So again, thanks for everyone for their attendance. So with that being said, again, I think there's a couple of things that we want to conclude with, and while we tool up a couple of the questions. So from a conclusion perspective, there's a little bit of Captain Obvious here as you're starting your plants back up, right? And one is plan your work and work your plan. So we've all heard that a number of times. I think that's so important. So the more you can prepare, whether it's based, being on the plant floor, the electrical side, as Ken and Jim talked about, or when you think about what Kelly was talking about, there's just a lot of planning. And the more you can prepare, the more you can, put things in motion ahead of time, the better off you're going to be. So just that's a big deal. Build out your roadmap, and it's going to have to be a cross-functional roadmap between your safety and EHS teams, with HR supporting the functions and driving that from a people perspective, and then electrical maintenance and facilities. There's collectively everyone's got stake in the game to make sure that plant gets opened up correctly. And then last but not least, again, FZ is here to help and facilitate in any way we can. So we would welcome that opportunity. All right. So with that being said, let's go through a couple of questions that we have, and I'm going to do my best to read these, off and get the panelists to join in. So if the panelists, Jim, Ken, and Kelly, if you guys could turn on your video, that would be great, and we'll go from there. So with that being said, there's it looks like we got a email that bounced in from Susan, who's a controls engineer, and I have an old PLC 5, so an Allen Bradley PLC 5 program. It looks like it's on a critical machine. She has the logic files, but doesn't have any of the descriptors visible on her PLC 5. She's worried about troubleshooting this for obvious reasons. Without the, the annotations on this, it's going to make it tough to troubleshoot. Is there any easy answers or steps should she be going through? So, I'm thinking, Jim, I'll throw that over to you. I think that's kind of in your wheelhouse.
Yep. Yeah, good question. We actually see this quite a bit. So I would say if there was any way to search any of the network drives or old computers that they would have laying around, search for that ladder logic file. Chances are they're somewhere. Then hopefully, your control drawings files are updated. It would take some time, but that might help get started in re-documenting that ladder logic file. Worst case, we could help, to use your word, Steve, annotate those files and update the drawing sets. And we could then store them on a virtual machine or a computer or server for easy access for them. I would say that I'm sure they're aware of this already, but Rockwell no longer makes a PLC5. That's not even legacy technology. It's very old technology. May want to consider a migration to a newer PLC platform like ControlLogix. And potentially we could convert that program, that PLC5 program, and maybe keep a lot of the existing IO in place to make it a little faster, easier, and cost-effective solution to do. And I'm sure we'll have her email so we can reach back out and contact after this is finished.
That's great. Awesome. Good. Really good, Jim. Thanks. Next question that looks like came in here. We've got John from facilities, and his question is, I'm having some intermittent equipment failures. I don't have root cause on why, but I suspect dirty power. What's the best way to handle that? Ken, I'm thinking that's probably best suited for you. Are you good with that one? Maybe you and Jim, but why don't you start?
Yeah. So yeah, dirty power, intermittent power failure. So definitely a troubleshooting situation here. I guess some surface questions, that pop into my mind be, how old is the equipment? What is the extensiveness of this power system? Is it a big plant, small plant? Depends if are the failures happening on a regular or infrequent basis. All these things, kind of depend on where to look. I think an easy solution to start with would be an infrared scan. Look for, some higher temperatures on some lug terminals, things like that. Going through those steps of troubleshooting. I think in most circumstances for dirty power, it can be solved with an isolation transformer or line reactors, things like that. So yeah, it would take some troubleshooting. It would take a specialist to come, whether you have the equipment to do an IR scan or not, just making sure if that is something the facility is going to happen, definitely want to touch on the safety aspect of that. Going to need some arc flash training, the proper PPE for that. So yeah, with sort of a high level, that's where I would start.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for that. And again, John, thanks for the question. That was awesome. Another question that popped in. So it starts off, and I'm not sure how this works, Kelly, but I think it's going to come to you, but I'm not sure how much you paid Fred from an EHS department, but he basically stated, thanks for the informative presentation and really good practical advice. So awesome. So I think the question is, as we implement changes at our plant around social distancing, what buckets of change will be the hardest in terms of time, money, energy spent, et cetera? Will the hardest nut to crack be kind of people changes, which he's got highlighted as behavioral changes, physical changes like thermal equipment that you mentioned, or process related changes, AKA cleaning?
So that's a fantastic question. So thank you for the comments. That's great. I'm glad that you took a lot from it. And I think what I'm going to have to say here is everybody's favorite answer, which is it depends. What I would think of is go back to your risk assessment. If you've already gone down the path and have a plan in place, then your risk assessment should have already pointed you to where your biggest gaps are. And so that's going to be your risk assessment. If you're a high level risk, then that might point you more towards your processes and physical changes. If you're a lower level risk, then it may end up being your communication and ensuring that everybody has everything in place. They understand what needs to be done and that they're following it. They understand why. So if you have a good culture and your culture is really acceptance of change, then maybe you won't have many problems. If you don't have that great culture and you may have more resistance to that change, then that resistance to the change just in how we do our normal day-to-day work from now on may be a big resistance and lead to a longer journey for you. So any of those things we can actually help you out with, the prioritization of what should be coming first, where you should be spending and allocating some of your costs, and some really great ways to improve your culture around change. So we'd love to help you out if you have any more questions on that.
Great. And again, you know, from a question perspective, thank you all for the questions so far. So that's going to conclude kind of our webinar today. So first, you know, a couple of kind of closing comments. One, we really thank all our customers for attending today. Really good questions too. I want to thank, you know, some of the subject matter experts that are on the phone with us and on video today. Really, really solid content. Two other things. We will be following up with everyone who attended the webinar in terms of our checklists, and that's going to be sent out either today or tomorrow instead of next week. So that's going to be awesome. And then there's a couple webinars that we have coming up, and so I would encourage you to, you know, look at that webinar list that we have up on our website, as we showed earlier. And as Kelly mentioned, she's got a very specific, you know, webinar that's going to be a lot more media in her content in terms of the people and the processes side of social distancing and starting your plants back up. So I encourage all of you to do that. And last but not least, we do have a survey that's going to be coming out. We want to get your input on how we can make these educational webinars that much better. But this is being recorded. We are going to put this up on our website. If you or your colleagues want to hear it in the future, it's going to be there. And last but not least, again, if you have any questions, give our FC account managers a call. You know, our technicians, our electricians, our engineers, we're here to work with you and help you out any way we can. So again, we're going to conclude the webinar at this point. And again, thanks for attending. Please be safe out there and wash your hands on a regular and frequent basis. So with that, thank you very much and have a great day.